Hey train fans, welcome back to the Rockwall Canyon Railroad. Well, today we have white flags on 1055 because we have a special train to run today. Today is our first run of our Conway Scenic RR Valley train in its full consist. We have a 5-car train consisting of 3 former CNJ coaches, a dining car, and an observation car. The prototype for my 1055 was actually part of the roster at Conway Scenic Railroad from right around their startup until around the year 2010 when it was sold off to the Down East Scenic Railroad up near Bar Harbor. The 1055 has a 1,000 horsepower diesel switcher and was able to pull this consist very well. But they started to add a 6-car, which was getting to be a little bit much for it, and it had quite a long journey after they added the Bartlett run to the train. Nowadays, the train is either pulled by a 1950s GP7 or a GP9 or even a 1960s GP38. They also have a 1920s steam locomotive, an 060, that they use on the Conway run, which is an 11-mile round trip, which is a good distance for that size locomotive to run, given its capacity for fuel and water and everything. So as I've mentioned, the red coaches ahead are former CNJ coaches on the Conway train. The dining car, which is next in line, is a former Erie-Lackawanna MU coach that they converted into a dining car. And the tail car is a Pullman observation car. The actual Conway train has one of the original 1890s Pennsylvania Limited parlor observation car. It's a Pullman Palace wooden car. Unfortunately, in G-scale, they don't make any of those Pullman Palace cars, so I've settled on a USA Trains steel car, which is about the right length and similar arrangement inside, but aside from the paint, it's not terribly close to the design of that car. Anyways, here we are in Rockwall Canyon making our run around. Conway Scenic Railroad operates in this manner, and at the end of the line, instead of having a balloon track or a Y, they end at a passing siding. So the locomotive runs around the train and then hitches up in this manner and heads off in the opposite direction. Now, the setup of the train may look a little odd because 1055 is now heading forward, but I'm pulling it on the observation deck end of the train, which seems kind of contrary to what would be, proper. But the reason why they do that at Conway Scenic Railroad is because of the platform at North Conway. They want to make sure that the engineer can see the platform when the train's coming in. So that way he's on the right side of the cab and can see that everything is clear. So I'm kind of playing along with that with this train here, keeping it in the right order. So I've always enjoyed the Conway Scenic Railroad. It was one of my earliest experiences of actual one-to-one railroading when I was a little kid, and I've always had a really fond memory of going there and seeing the trains. There's a few different scenic railroads in New Hampshire. The Conway Scenic Railroad is probably the more historically accurate, and then there's 2 other lines, the Winnipesaukee Scenic Railroad and the Hobo Railroad, which are kind of owned by the same company. And they have more of a family-friendly ride with less of a historic theme. But their equipment is also, very historic to the area. It's original, Boston and Maine Central, Portland Terminal locomotives, and Boston and Maine coaches and so forth. And the rail line that they go up through is the former Concord and Montreal line, and the Lincoln branch, which served a major paper mill up in Lincoln, New Hampshire. So there's plenty of history if you want to dive into it, but their train ride is more for fun. Whereas the Conway Scenic Railroad, they've definitely kept more of a historic element to their yard. They've always allowed, in past years, they've always allowed people to look around the railroad yard and look at the various equipment. So it just being there for any amount of time, you can kind of really soak it in and really become a part of it. And in fact, one day when I was milling about the railroad yard, I came across a gentleman who was working on one of the locomotives. Actually, it was 1055 at the time. And it turned out he was the operations manager for the railroad. And he asked me if I was interested in volunteering for Conway Scenic Railroad. And so I did that for a couple of years. And it's a spectacular experience for me to be a volunteer trainman. Not quite a conductor, but I was able to, I had the punch and the hat and everything. So I was able to, go through and talk to the train riders. And at the end of the line, I helped out with the run around and connecting the locomotive back up and putting the airlines back together and doing the brake test and all that stuff. So it was quite the experience. And of course, speaking of the runaround, here we are back again at the end of the line. We've disconnected our locomotive, and we're going to send them down to the switch there and have them back up to the station here and run around the train, and then connect up again, head off in the other direction. Part of the fun of working at Conway Scenic Railroad was being able to experience some of the different equipment and seeing how things work differently in each one. This particular ALCo switcher, because it was designed for doing yard work and so forth, all the airlines were on the engineer's side of the engine. So making the hitch on this end was actually a little easier because the airlines were all right there, and I didn't have to climb over the walkway to do anything. It was all right there. Now, one thing that was kind of funny about that engine is the angle cock for the airline was for some reason different than all the other engines. Instead of being normal to the airline for off, it was in line with the airline. So it was very easy to look at it and think it was already shut off by somebody else, and the brakeman would unhitch the train, and then all of a sudden all the air would hiss out of the locomotive, and the engineer would be yelling at him. And so that was something kind of funny. If you spend a lot of time with that engine, which it didn't get a lot of use toward the end of their its time at Conway Scenic Railroad, so not many people knew that little quirk about it. So it's kind of fun to watch sometimes, and people would get tripped up by that. The only other engine that had kind of an unusual setup was the steam locomotive, the 7470. And of course, that was also a switcher, so that was set up very similar to 1055, where all the airlines were on the engineer's side, so that, if the brakeman or fireman was helping with the switching duties, the engineer could see what was going on, and nobody was hidden off on the other side. Kind of a clever little safety feature there. All right, so rolling out of Pont Rocheau, our excursion train here is heading up the steepest grade in the line. Our little ALCo S-4 switchers having no trouble pulling this heavy train up the hill here and making its way through. We had an excellent little opportunity to get out here and run trains today. It was like almost 55 degrees. We had some rain in the morning and a little bit of snow the night before, but the snow's all melted away, and the rain is kind of held up for a little bit. It did rain a little bit later on in the afternoon, but I guess you can't really complain too much about a January afternoon being in the 50s and no snow on the ground. So we'll take that. This is great. All right, so one more view of our Valley train here with 1055 in power. And in case you didn't see the lettering on the side of the cars, here we start off with the Mount Washington car, then the White Horse Ledge car, the Mount Cranmore, and we have the Chicora Dining car, and the Veritas playing the Gertrude Emma. Alrighty, now for something completely different, we have our Boston and Maine 060 switcher playing the role of 7470, pulling the Valley train along. And it's running tender first, of course, in tribute to the operating procedure at Conway Scenic Railroad at this train consist. And of course, we'll run in the opposite configuration on the way back. Look at that nice steam plume here. It's a rather humid afternoon after having a bit of rain. The engine really runs best when temperatures are over 50 degrees. The engine runs on butane gas, which any temperature below that can be kind of difficult to fire in. The engine thankfully has the gas tank in the fuel in the tender, which allows me to put warmer water in there, which could enable it to run at colder temperatures. So in spite of its relatively small size, 442 does a pretty good job of pulling this train. Alright folks, that's all for today. Hope you enjoyed the episode. I'm Rocky Canyon RR, and that's how we do trains around here.